Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Dr. Arslan Shah. Today I am going to present pyelonephritis. At the end of this session, we will able to know about pyelonephritis, its types, acute, chronic, emphysematous, xanthogranulomatous, as well as we will discuss the Fournier gangrene as well. So this is the diagram. Here you can see this is the normal kidney, and while this is the pyelonephrotic kidney. This is the inflammation of the renal pelvis and the parenchyma. Here you can see this inflammation. And if this is recurrent or persistent, it leads to the scarring. So pyelonephritis is divided into acute and chronic. Acute is the inflammation of renal pelvis and parenchyma. Here, that is the severe and sudden. Here we can see foci of the pyelonephritis. While chronic is recurrent and persistent, which leads to the chronic and which result into the scarring and blunting of the kidney. So let's talk about acute pyelonephritis. Acute pyelonephritis is defined as inflammation of the parenchyma and lining of pelvis of the kidney. So let's talk about the organism involved in the pyelonephritis. Most common is the E. coli, that are basically gram-negative bacilli. Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, Proteus, Enterobacter are also involved in the acute pyelonephritis. So this is the basically distribution. Here we can see most of the pyelonephritis is caused by the E. coli, and then Klebsiella, and then you can see this is the Enterococcus, and then Proteus, and then others. So E. coli is the most common cause of acute pyelonephritis. It has fembri which attach or adhere to the mucosa of the urothelium. It has polysaccharide which attach and to the receptors, and we will discuss it further in detail. So first of all, we should know about what are the causes of acute pyelonephritis, how patient present, how we investigate, and how we treat. So as I already said, the most major cause of acute pyelonephritis is UTI and VUR. So these are basically risk factors that are contributing towards the pyelonephritis, and major bulk is the UTI, and then is the VUR, and this tells us the age distribution among pyelonephritis patient. In pediatric population, it's 0 to 4 years, and in adult, its peak is in female and male 35 and 30, and then 80 years, mostly in old age. In genetics, interleukin 6 and chemokine receptors are involved for this pyelonephritis. Multiple anatomic abnormalities like urethral stricture, posterior urethral wall, high bladder neck, increased intravesical pressure, and the ureteric stricture. These are all contributing towards pyelonephritis. Unnecessary use of antibiotics, specifically in Pakistan, in our region, this leads to the resistance for the antibiotics. This further also leads to the pyelonephritis. So these are risk factors. Here we can see this is the interior and posterior part of the urethra. BPH, urethral stricture, incomplete widening due to neurogenic bladder. In diabetic patients, CKD patients, transplant patients which are immunocompromised, which results in this bladder outflow obstruction. And this most common is the VUR, and ureteric stents and nephrostomy as well. If there is any stone, stricture, or tumor, these can also lead to the contribution towards the pyelonephritis. So pathogenesis of pyelonephritis is basically based upon the ascending as well as descending, and the most common pathway is the ascending pathway, and the less common is the descending or hematogenous. In ascending pathway, bacteria, I have already discussed gram negative, adhere to the mucosa of the urothelium, and if during Foley catheterization or during cystoscopy or in which we are intervening, so this bacteria can go towards the bladder and cause the cystitis. And when bacteria, first of all, phase is the adherence, it's adhere to the mucosa of the urothelium, and then it colonize, and due to short intramural thickening or high bladder pressure, diabetic or other any causes which results into the ascending of this E. coli, that is the most common, and that goes to the kidney, and it involves the renal pelvis and parenchyma, which leads to the pyelonephritis. So this is the less common pathway, that is the hematogenous. If infective carditis, IV drug abuser, or septicemia, this infection can go from this vascular and spread to the renal artery, and that cause the foci of this pyelonephritis. And while we have already discussed that this is the most common pathway which enter into the open duct of the papilla and cause the pyelonephritis. This is another picture. So what are the symptoms of pyelonephritis? Mostly patients present with high grade fever 102, 101, 103, with the flank pain at the costochondral region, and nausea and vomiting. This is the basic triad of this pyelonephritis. And the urinary tract symptoms like frequency, urgency, nocture. So we have to evaluate it from baseline. In baseline, first of all, we offer the complete blood picture, and in CBC we find increased neutrophil, increased TLC count, and then also increased ESR and CRP also noted in this pyelonephritis. And the urine DR and CS. In DR we find the increased pus cells and nitrate positive, and culture we got positive, urine culture as well as blood culture, and most common organism is the E. coli. So after baseline hematological investigation, we move forward towards the radiological imaging. And here you can see this is the normal kidney, and this is the pyelonephritic kidney, where we can see diffuse renal enlargement, decreased echogenicity, and loss of corticomedullary differentiation. If infection resolves within 2 to 3 days, it's fine. If it's not resolved after 72 hours, we can move towards the CT scan. This is the plain CT, and here we can see this one is the right-sided kidney, and this one is the left-sided kidney. Right kidney is comparatively enlarged, and hypoechoic, hypodense, and fat standing seen. So this is representing the picture of acute pyelonephritis. So what's the treatment? It depends upon is it is complicated or uncomplicated. If it is not associated with the sepsis or sign of sepsis, that is the uncomplicated, along with these triad, and if there is element of sepsis, that is the complicated. And in uncomplicated, we start with the oral antibiotic. So this is the flow chart, and here we can see patient present with these symptoms, and he has no any signs of sepsis. So we first of all investigated through cultures and all hematological investigations, and we start the fluoroquinolones for that patients. If it's improved within 72 hours, then we have to send urine culture at the day of treatment of 4th as well as 10 days. And if you indicate any urological evaluation, go ahead, otherwise there is no need. And if these symptoms are associated with the signs of sepsis, Then radiological evaluation is compulsory, and along with these hematological and investigations. And we have to start with the parenteral antibiotic, and in this class we can start with the fluoroquinolone, ampicillin, or third generation cephalosporin. And if it's improved after 72 hours, so same like this. And if it's not improved, then we have to hospitalize patients, and we have to repeat cultures, and then if there is any obstruction, drain that obstruction.
This algorithm is, I think, old, this one, because nowadays organisms are not sensitive to these antibiotics, ampicillin, fluoroquinolone. So now colomycin and imipenem, they are mostly used. So this is, Lokesh, yes, you are right, but our sensitivity has changed.
Yeah, I already discussed that in our setup in our Pakistan, unnecessary use of antibiotic leads to the resistance of that antibiotic, and this is the problem that we have no any other options.
And sir, still we have first line as fluoroquinolone, and then we can augment to third generation cephalosporin like ceftriaxone or something. Algorithm is still in the literature is still same.
Basically taken from the European guidelines actually, and they have also suggested that every hospital should have their own infectious disease guidelines for their organism and the antibiotic pattern.
So how to prevent it? Increase hydration, regular whiting, and cran max or cranberry uses. Basically, these are the prophylactically we use it, and there is no much literature about it, but they says that they prevent the adherence of the bacteria to the urothelial tract. So this is the summary of acute pyelonephritis. This is another one, and here we can see these are the basically signs. These are the initial presentation is the pain at the costovertebral angle, and this frequency and urgency. And this is the most common organism, that is the E. coli. And these are the risk factors which I have already described in details. And these organisms ascend, that is the most common pathway. We have the ascending as well as the descending. This one is the most common, and in infective endocarditis, IV drug abuser, or in septicemia, this spread from this one through this vasculature, and this through view or instrumentation, Foley catheterization from cystitis towards the pyelonephritis, and here is causing the inflammation of the renal pelvis and the parenchyma. So let's talk about the emphysematous pyelonephritis. That is the necrotizing inflammation of renal pelvis and parenchyma, along with caused just because of this gas-forming pathogen. That is the urological emergency, most common in diabetic patient as well as in the females. These are the risk factors: diabetic, urinary tract obstruction, elderly patients, and women. So most common organism is the E. coli, that gram-negative, bacilli, and other. So pathogenesis E. coli, and these proteases are gram-negative anaerobic organism which ferment glucose and lactate to carbon dioxide, causing necrotizing infection in the appropriate environment. These are the clinical features. Patient present with these triad: high-grade fever, flank pain, nausea, vomiting. The differential diagnosis is severe acute xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis, retroperitoneal perforation of abdominal viscus, sauce abscess, interocutaneous renal fistula formation, or any recent urological or radiological intervention. So in emphysematous pyelonephritis, first of all, we start with these hematological and investigations. And in RBS, high blood sugar level, derangement in the blood urea nitrogen and creatinine level, and in CP we find increased TLC and the neutrophils, and on culture we found the organism in the urine, and in urine detailed report pus cells are numerous and increased creatinine level. Even this patient can lead to the renal failure. So after these baseline investigation, we move towards the radiological investigation. And first of all, we start with these ultrasound. And here we can find the streak of air. And then we have another option, that is the X-ray KUB plane. And this CT scan is the investigation of choice for the emphysematous pyelonephritis. Because it tells us the extent of the pyelonephritis as well as treatment, and further we classify this on this basis, and then management is based upon this. So these are the plain X-ray, and here we can see in the left side there is streaks of air seen on the left sided as well as right sided, but most prominent on the left sided as well as on this right sided picture. This is another picture, and here we can see air streaks noted. This is the CT scan, and in this axial window we can see the gas formation, that because of the fermentation of glucose by the E. coli and forming this one. So these CT scans are taken from our institute, and these are the axial window. Patient presented to us with fever, flank pain, and nausea, vomiting. So after ultrasound, we perform the CT scan, and in this CT scan, we can see both kidneys are obstructive, hydronephrotic, and this is the air specs noted on the right side as well as the left sided, and fat standing is seen, and it's represented the classical picture of emphysematous pyelonephritis. So there are two classification radiological, and we classify it in, and the first one is the type, and we classify it type 1 and type 2, and then this one. Type 1 is basically most aggressive, and its mortality is approximate 70 to 80%, and it involves the destruction of renal parenchyma greater than 1/3, and there is no any renal or extrarenal fluid or noted in type 1. While when we talk about type 2, this is less severe, not aggressive, and its mortality is approximate 20%, and it's involved the less than 1/3 of the destruction of renal parenchyma, and fluid accumulation in renal or extrarenal is noted. And this is another radiological classification, and here this is the class 1, gas in the collective system. If gas in the collective system, that is the class 1, and if it's involved the parenchyma, it's 2, and 3 is further divided into 3A and 3B. In 3A, extension of gas into the perinephric space, while in 3B, extension of gas into the pararenal space. And the class 4 is if kidney is the solitary or bilateral emphysematous pyelonephritis. So management is based upon this one, and in class 1 and 2, percutaneous procedure and antibiotic, and this class 3 is 85% survival rate with percutaneous drainage and antibiotic, and in class 4 90% failure rate with percutaneous drainage and antibiotic. Initially, if patients present, we admitted it because it's urological emergency, we have to start antibiotic, and if kidney and if it's obstructive, we have to percutaneously drain that system, and if there is no any obstruction, And if we see that kidney is after treating antibiotic, patient severity is not improving, so then we have to further evaluate it by DMSA or any other. So we have to decide is it is non-functioning or not. So we have to move forward for the nephrectomy.
I think it is high time to involve the audience as well, because majority of the audience is sleeping. So Dr. Arslan Shah described first classification, where he described two classes. That is basically on the basis of aggressiveness of the disease we classify. So anybody from the audience, can you help us? How should we proceed with the management in type EPN type 1, and what should be our management plan in EPN type 2?
Dr. Arsalan has rightly described about type 1 and type 2, and this is the classification we are mostly following at our setup even. And type 1 is, as Dr. Arsalan has already said, it's associated with about 70 to 80% of the mortality. So depending upon the aggression associated with the type 1, the management plan is go with the same profile, like admissions followed by the cultures, including the blood culture, at least 2 blood cultures and the urine cultures, followed by baseline investigation and radiological investigations, including the ultrasound and CT for classifying the types and as per any possible intervention if required. So then we have to see the response. If we have starting from the fluids and IV antibiotics and catering the renal impairment, if there is any, specifically addressing any underlying condition which bring the patient to this disease, like diabetes is there, or some stone disease, or any acute illness which catch the patient. So we have to manage those factors as well. So for specific treatment in type 1, nephrectomy is the definitive treatment. So then we have to decide what is the adequate time for the nephrectomy. If patient is stable and if his vitals or overall stability allows you to proceed with the anesthesia, we can do that. Or other options we have is the minimal intervention, like if we has a collecting system dilated and if there is abscesses or things like this, we can go for some PCN or things like this as well.
Exactly, Shua has described well. Basically, in type 1, as Arslan just said, that there is no fluid or air that can be, pockets of fluid or abscess material that can be seen. So there are lesser chances that we can gain something from percutaneous drainage. While in type 2, we have advantage that we can, if we go for the percutaneous drainage along with the antimicrobial therapy, then we can preserve that kidney as well. Thank you, Shua.
Class 1 में कितना mortality?
70 to 80%.
Sorry, ये जो है, there is an improvement in the prognosis of these patients nowadays with the ICU treatment and the early intervention. So the mortality has decreased now to maybe 20% or less. And you can witness in our own data. असद क्या ख्याल है? मेरे ख्याल में अगर हम 10 साल पहले जाते हैं तो उसमें ज़्यादा थी, लेकिन अब जब से ICU ट्रीटमेंट है और एंटीबायोटिक्स हैं और PCN है, तो mortality has decreased from 70% to maybe, I think I don't have...
No, sir, absolutely you are right, because when I was doing my general surgery training from JPMC, we didn't have any such ICU available over there. So whenever any patient used to arrive in our ER with fournier gangrene or emphysematous pyelonephritis, so we were already told that this patient will not survive. But when I arrived in SIUT, I seldom see any patient who dies from these two very mortal diseases.
Yeah, and there's also a change from nephrectomy to conservative management in majority of the patients. Because in the past, this nephrectomy was being done as an emergency procedure. But nowadays with ICU, antibiotics and supportive therapy, emergency nephrectomy is not necessary.
Early intervention is important. If you drain even gas from the kidney, CT-guided percutaneous nephrostomy can be performed, and early intervention is important. Antibiotics and early intervention both. You can save patient and even kidneys as well.
सॉरी मौलवी साहब, इसमें जो है वो मल्टी मॉडलिटी ट्रीटमेंट है ना. It's important to have a good glycemic control by diabetologist and also an ICU person. Patient should be in ICU. If by controlling the glycemia and antibiotics and ICU, the mortality can be reduced.
Right. Thank you.
I have seen in the OPD many stable patients with pyelonephritis in this classification. Where just mentioned in classroom gas in the collecting system system only, not the amount of gas. I have seen many patients of emphysematous pyelonephritis walking into the OPD with gas in the pelvic ileal system and normal TLC count, no temperature, no sign of sepsis, normal glycemic control. Which class does it fall? Because in all cases in this classification, percutaneous nephrostomy has been mentioned from class 1, 2, 3, 4 in all of them. And I have seen many cases in which PC has been not done and the patient has gone home, running around and coming back and very stable. So all classes do not need to have an ICU treatment. If patient is not in sepsis, patient does not require any oxygen support or inotropic therapy or insulin infusion, then there is no point on keeping the patient in ICU.
ना सही है, लेकिन ये है कि आई थिंक देयर इज इंडिकेशन फॉर एडमिशन इन दीज पेशेंट्स. क्या ख्याल है आप लोगों का?
Exactly, sir. They deserve and need.
अगर कोई ऐसा घूम रहा है ओपीडी में तो उसको डिस्कस करके सीनियर से और उसको एडमिट करना चाहिए, बिकॉज दीज पेशेंट नीड पेरेंटरल एंटीबायोटिक्स.
Exactly, sir. And we have just, there is a window in every patient that arrives to you in OPD or emergency. There is a certain window where you have to take measures and save them from catastrophic events in future. So if there is any lucky patient who just went through our eyes and we did not pick him and he went home and he survived with the oral antibiotics, then he is very lucky. But if there is any evidence of gas in the collecting system, we must go for the percutaneous drainage and empirical antibiotic therapy to save him from further consequences.
It's one more thing, that if there is something called emphysematous pyelonephritis, then it is not innocent. It cannot be innocent. So if you, Dr. Roxana is saying that somebody is going around with air inside the kidney and pyelonephritis and septicemia perhaps, and the person is okay, then I think either we are deceived or the person is deceiving us, because the disease is there. The disease is actually telling you everything about evidences. So that person has to be in the hospital, has to be in the ICU. Otherwise, that person would go away without telling you anything. That is our job, to pick those persons and put them in hospital. So this is known as proactive sort of medicine. So anytime anyone who sees that kind of a patient, maybe that is a slippage in our own setup, in our own healthcare system, but that patient has to be taken into account, at least into our system.
Sure, thank you. So these are approach we have discussed in detail. So this is a summary. So let's talk about the chronic pyelonephritis. Inflammation of the renal pelvis and parenchyma, recurrent and persistent, it's lead to the scarring as well as blunting. This one is the normal and this is the picture of chronic pyelonephritis. So chronic pyelonephritis is associated with two main causes. First is obstruction, and that is reflux associated. And this is the picture, and here we can see this is the tunnel with water is flowing smoothly. And this is another view, and here we can see that there is obstruction. A stone is here, and this obstruction stone causes increasing in level of this water level, and that is more lethal than this one. Same in urinary tract, if there is stone or obstruction, that can result to the stasis of the urine, and this stasis of the urine results in the inflammation or infection of the urinary tract. So another one is the chronic, that is the reflex associated. If there is shortening of intramural thickening, or there is a increased intravesical pressure, or patient is diabetic, and other risk factor associated with these results into the ascent of these infection towards the renal parenchyma, which results into the scarring and blunting of the kidney. So this is the histopathological slide, and here we can see that tubular atrophy is noted. That is the prominent feature of the acute pyelonephritis, and here is a cystically dilated atrophic tubules. So this is the pathogenesis, and here this is the E. coli. It has the fembri and the lipopolysaccharide. These basically adhere to the mucosa of the urothelium. This is the cell membrane, that is the lipid bilayer. This is the cytoplasm, and this is the nucleus. And this lipopolysaccharide is attached to the CD14, and that activate the TAL receptors. These TAL-like receptors further migrate these nuclear factor into the nucleus, and where inflammatory markers initiated, cytokines and chemokines. And this is the inflammatory response in which temperature is mediated, and these interleukin 8 start the recruitment of the neutrophils, and then these tumor necrosis factor alpha enhance the vascular permeability and inflammation. This pathway is basically for the acute pyelonephritis, while transforming growth factor beta and these prostaglandin leads to the scar formation of the kidney. So this is the graph specimen, and here we can see this is the distorted and atrophic, and these are the. So these are the presentation of patient present with the fever, with the flank pain, with high blood pressure, because usually present with chronic renal failure, these patients, and frequency or urgency. So treatment is start with the antibiotic, and if there is any obstruction, relieve it, and the best painkiller. The role of surgical correction of VUR remains uncertain, but meticulous control of infection appears to prevent progressive scarring. So these are the preventive measures. So let's talk about the xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis.
But when there is an indication for MCUG in pyelonephritis, when we should go for MCUG?
If we are suspecting lower tract abnormality, like lower urinary tract symptoms and VUR, there is dilated system and dilated distal hydroureter, then we should proceed with the maturating cystourethrogram to rule out the bladder outflow obstruction and to diagnose the varico-ureteric reflux. But we should not proceed with the maturation cystourethrogram if there is acute infection, if there or urine culture is positive, because it will aggravate the reflux of the bacteria into the kidney, and it will further damage the kidney and lead to the scarring.
इसमें क्या है कंसेंसस क्या है आप लोग सब थोड़ा जरा उस पर ओपिनियन दें कि अगर किसी को फ्लैंक पेन है और अल्ट्रासाउंड में कोई ऐसी ऑब्स्ट्रक्शन नहीं मिल रही तो कब हमें एमसीयूजी करके रिफ्लक्स को एक्सक्लूड करना चाहिए? क्या है इस पे डॉक्टर, इस पे क्या कंसेंसस क्या है?
There is a typical symptom.
रिकरेंट हो या क्या हो, मतलब
recurrent febrile UTIs अगर किसी के साथ हो रहे हैं तो then this is one of the indication to evaluate for the VUR.
रिफ्लक्स क्योंकि
febrile UTIs, recurrent febrile UTIs with one of the indication. And there's a typical symptom patient you sometimes adult patient can tell you if you go in detailed history that those patients experience heaviness or pain in that flank area while voiding, during voiding. So you can suspect there is a high index of suspicion of VUR if anybody comes to you with that kind of symptomatology.
Especially
Exactly, agreed with Dr. Naveed. When there is recurrent pyelonephritis, or if we are suspecting recurrent infections in these children, especially in children, and we are strongly suspecting that this is VUR, and there is chances of a vicious circle in these cases. When there is UTI, reflux increases, or when there is reflux, pyelonephritis, chances of pyelonephritis increases. So when we are sure that there are scarrings, episodes of scarring on DMSA after investigations, and patient have recurrent pyelonephritis, we must document reflux disease in these patients. Sometimes there is no reflux on routine MCUG. Then we can plan for the MCUG in active cystitis or active time of UTI after treating culture. We have to go through MCUG to document these patients with reflux. Because if we know that these patients are developing reflux or they already have reflux, then we will have to follow them very closely. So this is very necessary at that time. So MCUG is indicated when we strongly suspect that this is because of reflux disease, or reflux is there after some UTI.
So
Otherwise,
what should be done first? The DMSA scan or the MCUG?
the recent guidelines tell about the top to bottom approach and DMSA first, and then if it tells that kidney has multiple scarrings because of episodes of pyelonephritis, then we will have to go MCUG if indicated.
Right. So, GM, behind you, Nazish is sitting. What is the top-down approach? Can I ask her?
Sir, there is a approach that first to evaluate for the poop means by doing the MCUG and then go for the DMSA.
That is the other way around. What is the top-down approach? It is a down-up approach.
First to do the DMSA.
Patient is not topsy-turvy. You can't go it up and down and down and up. What's the form?
If first do the upper track, then go for the lower track. That's the top-down approach.
We didn't ask anybody where.
Anybody from the audience except Shua. Okay, Dr. Mushtaq.
Sir, in top-down approach, first we do DMSA, and if there is scarring is present, then we go for
MCUG is for top-down or it's for down-up?
माइक में बोले, आपकी आवाज कम आ रही है.
MCUG क्या देख रहा है? ऊपर देख रहा है, नीचे देख रहा है? तो ये तो मैं तो टॉप डाउन कह रहा हूँ ना, तो आप डाउन अप कह रहे हो.
सर टॉप डाउन में पहले हम डीएमएसए करते हैं, अगर उसमें स्कैरिंग का एविडेंस.
तुम ट्रेन से कराची से सफर करते हो ना डेरा गाजी खान, तो ये डाउन लेते हो टिकट अप लेते हो? लिखा होता है यार उसके ऊपर, है ना? So चलें.
So let's talk about the xanthogranulomatous. That is the rare one and chronic and in which granuloma formation. It is difficult to differentiate between the tumor from RCC and adenocarcinoma or squamous cell carcinoma. And lipid-laden macrophage are noted, and these are the foamy histocytes in the histopathological slides. And this is the grass specimen. Their architecture is replaced with the mass-like yellow disc-like coloration. And here we can see dilated calyx with the yellowish and the necrotic component seen in the grass specimen. And we start with the after lab investigation with the ultrasound. And here this left-sided we can see this is the stone. Mostly stones are the partial staghorn stones are involved in the xanthogranulomatous. And here we can see this is the replacement of the renal parenchyma with the hypodense. This is basically bare pass signs in radiological terminology. and this represents the classic picture of the xanthogranulomatous. Bear paw.
Beer paw.
So this is another picture where we can see this is the hedonephrotic kidney with the dilated calyx, and the loss of the cortex is appreciated. And this one is another picture patient presented to us in SIUT urology. And after investigations, we did the CT scan, and here this is the stone in the pelvis, and this is the renal parenchyma, which is replaced by this. And here this is a picture of xanthogranulomatous.
Arslan, sorry, एक मिनट सर, sorry.
Yeah.
आपने बियर पॉट साइन कही ना, रेडियोलॉजिकल, को और भी साइन होती है क्या इन्फेक्शंस में? रेडियोलॉजिकल जो साइन,
As far as I know, the bear's paw.
और कोई? Anybody else? Is there any radiological sign to diagnose of renal infections?
शोभा कुछ कहना चाह रहे?
Not XGP, लेकिन किसी और में रेडियोलॉजिकल साइन एक और भी है जो
Sir, we're talking about rim signs.
हाँ, रिंग साइन, रिंग
Sir,
enhancing sign.
there are rim sign and there is a reverse rim sign as well.
हाँ,
Rim
क्या?
is, sir, rim is for cortical nephrosis in cases of chronic pyelonephritis, and reverse is rim is for medullary necrosis.
It's for the
Parenchyma.
renal abscess.
Yes, sir.
Renal abscess, ring sign, enhancing ring sign.
Enhancing.
Renal abscess में आपको मिलता है.
Right.
On CT scan. ठीक है. But this
So,
is just
yeah, thank you. And most organism is the Proteus and E. coli, and the definitive treatment is the nephrectomy. And this is basically the summary, and in which most common organism and is 5th to 7th decade, mostly in women in 70%. And these are the presentation, and nephrectomy is the standard approach for the diagnostic as well as the therapeutic.
Just a word about this xanthogranulomatous pyelonephritis. Most of the cases, as we have said earlier on, are chronically inflamed structures. They mimic something called a tumor, a renal tumor, and surgery is always a very difficult kind of approach. So one is always in a kind of a situation when somebody is thinking about pre-planning the surgery, how this kidney should be taken out. Now, if you are in the process of differentiating between tumor and xanthogranuloma, one test that can be done easily and by involving the histopathologist is to take a urine sample. And as you have seen, as you have said in the last slide, the lipid-laden macrophages, they come in urine. So if you take urine specimen and ask your histopathologist to see those urine samples, they can see the macrophages laden with lipid. So these are foamy macrophages, and they are pathognomonic of xanthogranuloma.
Yeah.
So there is one test that can give you a very definitive kind of diagnosis beforehand.
Thank
और
you.
दूसरी चीज सर, प्रेजेंस ऑफ स्टोन जो है ना, वो भी एक डिफरेंशिएटिंग पॉइंट है. जैसे आरसीसी या एडनोकार्सिनोमा है तो उसमें स्टोन इट्स एक्सट्रीमली रे हो सकता है, लेकिन अगर आरसीसी है और एक्सजीपी की डिफरेंशिएशन है तो उसमें एक्सजीपी में स्टोन होता है 90-80% में, और एडिनोकार्सिनोमा में या जो रीनल ट्यूमर है उसमें स्टोन एक्सट्रीमली रेयर लेकिन नहीं होता ज्यादातर. तो ये भी एक डिफरेंशिएटिंग पॉइंट है कि
एसोसिएटेड स्क्वेमस सेल कार्सिनोमा का लिटरेचर में जिक्र है. दूसरा है कि ये प्रोटीज जो है ना, ये हम तो नहीं देखते ज्यादा. देखा मैंने 2-3 पेपर्स पढ़े फॉरनियर्स के और जेंथो के, तो प्रोटीज का जिक्र है. प्रोटीज ऑन द टॉप है, फिर इकोलाई है, फिर सुडोमोनास है. हम प्रोटीज नहीं देखते, इकोलाई देखते हैं ज्यादातर अपने कल्चर्स में, और सुडोमोनास देखते हैं. तो प्रोटीज का लिटरेचर में जिक्र है अच्छा खासा. ये भी हमारी आईडी टीम से बात करनी चाहिए कि व्हाई दिस इज डिफरेंस. हम प्रोटीज को इसका शाजो नादरी देखते हैं, नहीं ज्यादातर इक्वलाई देखते हैं, सुडोमोनास देखते हैं.
जैसे स्ट्रूवाइट स्टोन जो है ना, वो भी उसको पुराने जमाने में कहा जाता था कि ये प्रोटियस स्टोन, लेकिन मैं जब हाउस जॉब में था तो हमारी लेबोरेटरी देती थी प्रोटियस उसमें, यहाँ हमारी लेबोरेटरी जो, लेकिन अभी मुल्ली साहब सही कह रहे हैं कि प्रोटियस हैज बिकम वेरी रेयर. आई डोंट नो व्हाट्स द कॉज. सम या तो हॉस्पिटल एक्वायर्ड इन्फेक्शंस है, इकोलाई, सुडोमोनास, और वो जो था वो पेशेंट से आता था या कम्युनिटी से. There is some reason for it, and definitely there's a decrease in the proteus.
So this is the friend dermatologist. His mostly work is based on the syphilis, but in 1883 he presented his 5 cases series of Fournier gangrene. So Fournier gangrene is basically named by this gentleman. So this is the necrotizing fasciitis of the external genitalia that involve the skins and scrotum. And mostly distribution in male is 75% in the scrotum and female is in the labia. So this infections can spread to the facial planes. Actually, perineum is divided into urogenital triangle as well as anal triangle, and the imaginary line between ischial tuberosity divide anteriorly into the urogenital triangle and posteriorly into the anal triangle. And infection spread from anal triangle and through superficial fascia of Colles fascia, it spreads into the dartus of the scrotum and the bucks of this penile fascia, and if it's interiorly, and if it's ascend or spreads toward the superiorly, and it's involved the interior abdominal through the scarpa fascia, and this infection is spreads into ischiorectal fossa. That infection can spread into the buttocks or the thighs. So these facial planes are, so infection can spread through this. So it has the urogenital causes like paraphimosis, circumcision, urethral stricture, trauma, and even most common in the diabetes as well, and as well as the anorectal causes. So pathophysiology is the portal entry of microorganism into the perineum or genitalia that impaired the cellular immunity, and if environment is favorable, that's permit the infections, and synergistic effects promote rapid spread and extensive tissue damage. In resultant, macrovascular thrombosis lead to cutaneous and subcutaneous necrosis, facilitating bacterial proliferation and these facial planes. So this is the entry of bacteria, and the coagulation, fibrinite coagulation of these nutrient vessels result in the hypoxia and decreased local blood supply to the skins. And the most common organism involved are the Streptococcus and Staphylococcus and the Clostridium perfringens. These are the anaerobic and microcephalic organism that produce the enzymes collagenase, lecithinase, hyaridinolinase that results in the digestion of these facial barrier and rapid spread of the infection. So patients present with the swelling, pain, fever. Pain is the typical presentation. So sudden pain in the scrotum associated with pallor, pyrexia. This is an other picture. So in initial state, it's difficult to differentiate between cellulitis and the Fournier gangrene. So radiological imaging can help us if we consider where clinical findings are inconclusive. Presence of gas in soft tissue is indicative of these Fournier gangrene. This is an X-ray. Here we can see the gas is present and it's denoting the.
So, Mansa, why is it exclusively seen in males? We haven't, at least I haven't seen a case of female in the past 20, 25, 30 years.
Ratio of 10 to 1.
लेकिन मेरे ख्याल में शायद फीमेल जो पेशेंट है वो हमारे पास नहीं आती, शायद गायनी में भी जाती हैं क्या?
तो लिटरेचर में भी यही है, 10 to 1 है. मैं फॉर्नियर का जो रेशो है मेल टू फीमेल 10 to 1 है, और जेंथो का जो है वो 1 to 4 है. मैंने मोर इन फीमेल्स, 4 females 1 male. तो ये है, लिटरेचर में भी है. तो फीमेल्स में ये फॉर्नियस रेयर है, हम भी नहीं देखते यहाँ पे. या तो आई डोंट नो.
और एम्फाइजीमेटस फीमेल्स में ज्यादा है ना? एम्फाइजीमेटस
जेंथो और एम्फाइजीमेटस में ज्यादा है.
There is more, we see Fournier's gangrenes in males.
बिल्कुल सही।
Phimosis, paraphimosis, we don't see these in females.
In females that have the short urethra and their close proximity to the
It is
anus.
UTI is more common. All types of UTI are more common in females.
So you want to say that the Fournier's gangrene is secondary to bladder outlet obstruction, or it is something
Nay, the
related
high risk
to?
factors, the factors that he has just recently mentioned, that stricture, bladder outlet obstruction, he has been mentioning all these things. Stricture and bladder outlet obstruction are very rare in females.
I think it is something to relate to periurethral glands, which is an area that is not much researched into. Periurethral glands are those glands which are more in quantity and magnitude in males as compared to females. There are certain other things. For instance, they do open into the introitus in females, but they do open into urethra. Manzab?
जी जी ये लेकिन ये भी हो ये इसमें जो है ना वो STI कितना है इन ग्रुप में STI है
STI in sexual intercourse, it's caused the
जो
trauma.
है फोर्नियर गैंग्रीन्स क्योंकि फोर्नियर जो पहले जो डिस्क्राइब किए थे ना पहले केसेस जो फोर्नियर ने किए थे वो सारे STI वाले थे
इसमें ट्रॉमा का जिक्र आज
Trauma-
जाता है
tra- trauma is-
पेरियनल एब्सेसेस
Okay.
पेरियनल एब्सेसेस एंड पेरियनल एब्सेसेस and fistulas, anorectal fistulas, these are amongst causes of Fournier's.
हाँ, क्योंकि यूरिथ्रल
Literature.
जैसे डॉक्टर असद कह रहे
New
हैं कि
literature.
यूरिथ्रल जो है वो
ये भी है जैसे
यूरिथ्रल ग्लैंड्स का जो ज्यादातर इन्वॉल्वमेंट है वो गोनोकोकस की वजह से पेरियूरिथ्रल एब्सिस तो मे बी वहां से जो है वो क्योंकि जो इनिशियल जो इन्हें डिस्क्राइब किए थे ना केसेस वो सारे STI रिलेटेड थे जो आपने बताया ना
जी।
फॉर
तो इसका ताल्लुक मेरा नहीं ख्याल के स्ट्रक्चर से इतना है जितना जो है वो उन ग्लैंडुलर स्ट्रक्चर्स
Infection.
की इन्फेक्शन से है।
हाँ।
वो चीज ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट है
अच्छा ज्यादातर जो है
एनाटॉमिकल
वो
प्रॉब्लम।
अच्छा आजकल जैसे कि हमारे यहाँ आप लोगों ने सबने देखा होगा कि 3-4 पेशेंट दाखिल रहते हैं तकरीबन हर एट एनी गिवन टाइम और ज़्यादातर पेशेंट जो है ओल्ड एज है यंग भी है लेकिन ज़्यादातर और अगर फैमिली हिस्ट्री लेंगे तो फैमिली की जो सपोर्ट है वो इतनी नहीं है इन पेशेंट्स को therefore they are neglected and they come late with this complication. So I think general hygienic and immunity or nutrition
Yes, sir. Nutrition
और
is one.
uncontrolled diabetes भी एक factor है.
So these are the different presentation. These patients presented to us in our emergency. These are all other patients, and these have the different presentation from these vary from one and each other. So management is first of all admit these kind of patients and recognize these patients. Is start initiative antibiotic and then the serial debridement. So
सॉरी इसमें जो है ना जैसे आपने कहा था कि सेलुलाइटिस जो है तो सेलुलाइटिस और फोर्नियर गैंग्रीन की जो है डिफरेंशिएशन इज बाय क्रेपिटस ठीक है ना तो
On examination,
आपको
right.
फोर्नियर गैंग्रीन में क्रेपिटस मिलता है जो कि उसमें नहीं मिलता तो इट्स हाई अलर्ट साइन के ये इसको एडमिट करना चाहिए आईवी हाइड्रेशन और आईवी एंटीबायोटिक शुरू कराना चाहिए
yeah, you are right. Basic diagnosis is based upon the clinical. So first of all, we have to start incision in the skin and the subcutaneous tissue, and we have to remove these necrotive patch. And in this diagram, we can see this is the testis, and we preserve it because testes have their own blood supply. So these are other pictures. This is another patient we presented to us, and we did the and we have two options. If it's involving the urethra, we have to move for the suprapubic, and if it's near to the anal region, and we should go for the diversion, that is the diversion colostomy. And after debridement, we involve the general surgical team, and this patient presented to us in our services, and after involving, we did the diversion colostomy. And this patient also presented 2 days back in emergency, and we did the debridement. And after the first setting, we dress this patient, and we relocate after 24 to 48 hours to see, and we kept this wound open. So here we can see we have opened this wound. So if it involves the after wound healing, we involve the plastic surgery to close it by their flaps. So this is an adjuvant to the surgical debridement. This hyperbaric oxygen therapy basically prevents the microorganism and also prevent these spreading of this infection through these facial planes. So, but there is this reported in the case series. We have no as much data about it. As well as same for this FlexiSeal fecal management. This is also reported in different case series, and there is a lack of data regarding this one. This is basically alternative to the Davarian colostomy. This is silicone catheter, which is kept for 2 to 3 weeks when we go through these serial debridements, and after these wound, and main benefit of this is this actually prevents the hygienics, and then later on we remove it. But this is alternative because alternative in other sense that Davarian colostomy have their own complication regarding stoma handling and their electrolyte imbalance and rest of. So this is my thank you.
एक सर्जन है यहाँ कराची में जो हनी इस्तेमाल करते हैं फॉर ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ दिस, आप जानते हैं, और he claims that honey जो use of honey for this dressing and cleaning gives the best results. बोला साहब आप जानते हैं उनको?
हाँ, ये
असलम सूफी साहब ना, असलम सूफी नाम है।
टिश्यू कल्चर्स हम नहीं भेजते, इसका जिक्र है लिटरेचर में। हम जो अगर डिब्राइड करना है तो वी शुड सेंड कल्चर्स, टिश्यू कल्चर्स फर्स्ट एंड देन वी शुड स्टार्ट एंटीबायोटिक्स, क्योंकि सेलुलाइटिस वाला तो काम खत्म हो गया ना। अब तो आपको अगर फॉरनिया से एस्टेब्लिश्ड और यू हैव टू डिब्राइड इट, then I think we should not start antibiotics first. We should send tissue culture first, and then antibiotics, and then according to sensitivity later on. So इस पे काफी emphasis है लिटरेचर में कि आप
इसमें इसको प्रोटोकॉल बना ले कि हर एक आदमी के कल्चर्स भेजे जाएं before we start the antibiotics. और मेरा ये ऑब्जर्वेशन है कि इसमें भी इम्प्रूवमेंट हुई है in the management and also in the prognosis.
Yeah, the serial debridement has key role in the management.
In our center,
yes,
I have observed that there is a decrease in the mortality and improvement in the results with multiple debridements and ICU treatment.
So उसमें एक हमने पहले ऑडिट भी किया था फॉर्नियस गैंग्रीन का, और हमने ये भी देखा था कि दिस इज प्रॉब्ली वन ऑफ दोज पैथोलॉजीज जो सिर्फ हमारे जैसे हॉस्पिटल, पब्लिक हॉस्पिटल्स में ही आती है, प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स में नहीं आती, इसलिए कि इसका ट्रीटमेंट बहुत रिट्रैक्टेड होता है, बहुत टाइम लगता है और रिजल्ट्स जल्दी नहीं आते। दूसरा है कि इट नीड्स एग्रेसिवनेस ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ फिजिशियन। इसमें कंजर्वेटिव मैनेजमेंट की कोई वो नहीं है, जितना आदमी कंप्लेसेंट होता है उतना ही टाइम लग जाता है।
और ये सही है, एग्रेसिव ट्रीटमेंट की जरूरत है, और जो मल्टीपल debridements, supportive therapy, antibiotics, hydration, and ICU.
I must give credit to Dr. Munawar साहब because I have seen him. वो किसी और को ड्रेसिंग को हाथ लगाने नहीं देते थे। अगर अभी भी कोई पेशेंट आ जाए ना, मुझे यकीन है कि वो किसी को नहीं, और वो 15-20 दिन के बाद वो मरीज ऐसे सही होके जाता था कि मिरेकल हो जाता था, प्रोवाइडेड के 1-to-1 correspondence of between the physician or the surgeon and the patient.
आप जैसे केसेस दिखा रहे थे ना, तो इस तरह से I am sure कि mortality has gone very low.
Another person who takes these patients very seriously and does very good debridement is Dr. GM in our generation. So he's very good at doing radical debridements, and whenever there is very stinky and smelly discharge from the patient, no other surgeon bothers to go there, and Dr. GM takes it as a challenge and he manages that very well.
So kudos to both of them, Dr. GM and Dr. Munawar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
One more surgeon is there who does very good radical debridement in these cases, and that is Dr. Sara. We usually give patients to her, and she almost always manages them very well, because there is a concept of aggressive treatment in Fournier gangrene. Similarly, there is aggressive debridement concept in the Fournier gangrene, because this is the disease which starts with ischemia, and we need to debride the tissues till there is the start of oozing or bleeding at these sites, because if there is residual necrotic tissue, that is ischemic tissue, and these anaerobic organisms will not go away from these patients. So this is very necessary, that one good aggressive radical debridement is necessary till there is oozing, tissues start oozing. So this is
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. GM. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.